Hi, I'm Lindsay Bugby from the Postman's Knock, and today I'm going to teach you how to make 3D letters. It's handy to know how to make 3D letters because 3D letters make a message stand out despite whatever else is going on visually in a piece. So you can see with this eat more kale here, eat more kale is what jumps out at you even though we've got a lot going on in the background, and that's because of this dramatic shading here in the back. And it's the same with this thank you card to a lesser degree. We've got a lot going on here visually, but thank jumps out at you because of the shading behind the letters. For today's tutorial, I have the Eat More Kale from the sketchbook page. What I would recommend is that you go ahead and draw out your lettering. If you can, use your ruler and a pencil to draw it out and then go over it with pen. If you're pressed for time, you can always type out your message in a word processing program on your computer using sans serif lettering, print it out and trace over it using a bright window or a light box. But once you have that lettering and it's inked over, you'll want to choose the angle at which that shadow is going to meet the letter. So I'm going to pretend that my light source is coming from the upper left. And because of that, I'm going to draw guidelines that are coming from there. So if your light source were coming from the upper right, your guidelines would be going the other way. I'm using a parallel glider here, so this is simply a ruler that can glide across the page and make parallel lines. Super, super handy tool, but you can always use a regular ruler. All right, so once you've done this, you will want to draw these lines emanating from the letter. So I would make the lines 3/16 inches long, and you'll easily know how to do that because of the parallel glider. These lines on the parallel glider, 3/16 are just 3 of these little guys. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. And then we go over here to the end of the E again. 1, move this up a bit. 1, 2, 3. And then again, 1, 2, 3. So essentially what I'm asking you to do is find the edges, all of the edges of your letter, and then just make 3/16 inch long lines, 1, 2, 3, that go down from those edges. So let me speed up the video while I do the rest. All right, now you see how all of my edges here have shadows. And then there are some edges that I haven't drawn these lines down from, like this, because the shadow would just end up behind the letter, okay? So any edge where the line can go down, that's where you draw it. But an edge like this and this, any line would be completely behind the letter, so we just ignore that. Now what you do is essentially connect the dots. So we just connect all of these. Boom. Boom, boom, and then we connect these two, these two. So just at the end of those 3/16 inches lines that you drew. And then the last thing we need to do is draw lines going down from here to complete the 3D element. So we just go to the edge of this line and edge of this line, and there is our 3D letter. Okay, I'm going to do that again for the next 3 letters because those letters are similar to the E, lots of sharp edges, so pretty easy to work with, and then we'll reconvene when I get to the O. All right, I'm sure that you can see so far a lot of these lines depend on making lines that are parallel to the actual letter. So really our job is to figure out the edges, draw something that juts out from those edges, and then just connect them and make sure that they're parallel to the original letter. But when you have something like the O, what do? Well, you just try to figure out where the 1, 2, 3/16 would be. So we're essentially assigning edges to the O, even though the O doesn't have edges, just figuring out various points in that letter where the shadows would be. 1, 2, 3. And then on the inside as well, because we know that the light source is coming from the left, so the shadows will be on the right. And if that intimidates you, don't be intimidated. It's just a basic drawing principle. I mean, you know that if the sun is coming from up here, then the shadow is going to be over here, right? Or if the sun is coming from over here, the shadow is going to be over here. It's just, if you look at any object around you, that's how it works. So that's the principle that we're following here. And then you're just going to eyeball the shadow here, staying true to that 3/16 of an inch. And note that 3/16 is an arbitrary number that I chose. You could make your shadows longer, you could make them shorter, whatever feels right to you. And again, at this point, I am eyeballing, just trying to follow the contours of that O and connect to my 3/16 inches lines. And another thing too, you notice that the shadow of the M intersects the O. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure that your shadows stay behind an intersecting letter. So you're never going to have the shadow come out in front of the O. Otherwise, it's just not going to look right. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to speed up the video unless there's a pertinent tip that I need to give you. Okay, and there's a reason that we use a pencil for stuff like this, because it's tough to get it right the first time. And as I was lining this up to move up for the E, I noticed that the O stops well above this line, and we do want it to extend all the way to that bottom line like the other letters. So let's go ahead and give it that bottom line extension. Then that's much better, much more consistent. Moving on. And there we go. Now we have got the shadow outlines for our 3D letters, and all we have to do is draw over them. So I've already got these lines here. What I'm going to do is trace over them with a fine-tipped Sharpie. So I'll speed up the video to do that. Now you can see that that already looks more commanding than what we started with without the shadows. And once your ink has dried, you'll want to erase your pencil guidelines. And then how you shade these is totally up to you. You have so many options. I'm just going to show you a couple. You can use just short lines that are parallel to those first lines you made. So you can see that that's what I did here. I made these teeny tiny lines to shade that. Or you can use colored pencil to add the shadow. So in this case, I think it's maybe fun if I start with a dark green and then make this tone a little lighter, so exert a little less pressure, and finish off with a light green. Just taking a cue from the subject of the words here. And to make that letter even more impactful, you could fill the whole thing in with black or even another color. Or for another shadow variation, you can just fill in the entire shadow with black, like in the original Eat More Kale artwork that I showed you. And there you go. Those are only 3 ways to make your shadow outline stand out. You should feel free to experiment with patterns, with colors, with placing illustrations behind the lettering. All of those things are going to help your artwork to stand out and help to make the message more impactful. I hope that you found this tutorial to be helpful. If you want to look at photo examples and find written instructions along with a block lettering shadow cheat sheet, go ahead and pop on over to the TPK blog where you will find that written tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.